begin with the opening remarks from all our panelists. The discussion today is on the theme Global Connect, the contributions of the Indian diaspora in the context of India's G20 presidency and how the Indian diaspora can take India's message forward in the years to come. Let me begin with Ambassador of Israel, Ambassador Gilon. Let's begin with 2-minute remarks from each of our panelists, and then we'll begin the question-answer session. Ambassador.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Beyond the obvious contribution of the 80,000-strong Indian community in Israel, and one has to remember, Ambassador Shringla did not mention Israel as part of the places where he got connected to the Indian diaspora when he served as a junior officer, I believe. But in general, of course, their contribution is part of many contributions of countries, of a country of immigrants from more than 100 countries like Israel. So this is obvious, and I think this is one of the things that help us after, the push and the rush in our official diplomatic relations after they were established relatively late in '92. It came so fast and so high because we had very strong bridges, I believe. But beyond that, the thing I wanted to mention is what you are already and other organizations are doing is the cooperation between the diasporas around the world. If you look at the figures, and I believe that Ambassador Shringla also spoke a little bit about it, the biggest number of non-American Unicon founders are Indians, second very short after are Israelis. And I believe that the potential between Indian and Israeli/Jewish diaspora in a few countries especially are very, very strong. Those two diasporas are very strongly connected to the motherlands. But they have their own issues. I mean, they have influence, they have power, they have sometimes business influence, money, but we have our issues, and I believe that in 4 main countries where we both have strong diasporas, the cooperation should be much stronger. It's the US, Canada, UK, and Australia. I think in those 4 places, at least we have very strong Israeli/Jewish diasporas. And I believe that the cooperation is very essential, helping each other in the places, but also working with our countries, so making it Israel, India, India, Israel, with the diaspora's support. Thank you.
Ambassador Keshap.
Thank you so much, Parikshit. Good morning to everybody. Let me start just by saying how much I appreciate M.R. Rangaswamy and Indiaspora for bringing us all together. M.R., thank you very much. Permit me also to say what an honor it is to be here together with all of you in the loving arms of Mother India, a civilization that has spread her light and wisdom throughout the world for millennia. Friends, it's humbling to be a representative of the United States at this meeting because there are 4 million Indian Americans, and I won't bore you with all the stories of the Satya Nadellas and the Rohit Khannas and all of them. You know those stories. But I'd like to illustrate a point, if I may. In 1984, when my dad retired from the UN and we moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, there was only one other Indian family in that town. And so we were rare birds in that era. And now when you go back to my hometown, there are hundreds of Indians in Charlottesville, Virginia. When I joined the Foreign Service in 1994, I was only aware of 2 other Indian Americans in the entire Foreign Service, State, USAID, Commerce, etc. Sitting right there is a former Assistant Secretary of Commerce, Arun Kumar, who led the Commerce Department International Division in a certain era. Nowadays, there are hundreds of American diplomats who are of Indian origin. And in 2014, as part of this effort to build the diplomatic initiative that has now led to the Quad, a delegation of us were in Tokyo for talks. And this illustrates a point I'll make in a minute. The delegation was led by Assistant Secretary of State Nisha Biswal, and I was her Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for South Asia. And there was a fellow named Nirav Patel, who was the Deputy Assistant Secretary for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. And there was a fellow named Basant Sangera, who was on my team on the India desk. And we all, Americans are very respectful of our Japanese allies and, respectful of their culture. And when they say dinner starts at 7, by golly, we get there at 6:56 if we can manage it. So we walk in and, we chit-chat a little bit. And this is a trilateral meeting, USA, Japan, India. We're all getting together to talk about issues of mutual interest. And we get in there, we start talking, we have a little polite conversation, and about 5 minutes later, one of the protocol officers comes to me and says, hey, we're really glad you guys are here, but we're still waiting for the Americans. Now, what's the point? And then I'll pass the mic. The United States of America, as Ambassador Garcetti said so well last night, is a land of sheer unlimited potential. And I feel very grateful to be a son of America and India and to be with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ambassador Keshap, for those wonderful remarks. High Commissioner Gopaul, over to you.
Thank you very much. And I must say congratulations to the organizers for this very important conversation and conference. And I cannot say that I am a son of India because I am a great-grandson of India. Thank you. So my great-grandfather left Ayodhya around the year 1845. The relationship between Trinidad and Tobago and India actually started in that period, 1845. So we are about 178 years thereabout of having this relationship. But an important aspect of the diaspora must be understood. When we talk about the Indian diaspora, we use the word very universally, very widely. Whereas for us, the Indian diaspora is actually understood in two aspects. The Indian diaspora from those who went through the indentured labor system from 1838 to around 1917, who left India. And by the way, it was almost 2 million Indians who left India during indentureship, which was a modified version of slavery. The experiences of this diaspora is very different from the experiences of the diaspora that left after for educational purposes, business opportunities, investments, and of course, using travel agents. So when we look at the Indian diaspora and its contribution, I think it is very important in this discussion to be able to identify the differences in this diaspora and what this diaspora means to India today and who this diaspora represents. So I'm very happy to be part of this discussion that I may give a perspective on the Indian diaspora of Suriname, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and even Jamaica. That is vastly different from the dialogue that we are accustomed to having based on the diaspora of these other countries. So again, thank you once more, and my deepest appreciation for being here today.
Wonderful remarks there, High Commissioner Gopaul, and you've given us a lot to think about, and we will come back to that as soon as we begin our panel discussion. High Commissioner Mackay, over to you.
Great, thanks very much. Really delighted to be here. And I think many of you in the audience will know just how deep the Canada-India connection is. It's driven by the diaspora and more, but just on the diaspora, some of the latest numbers. So almost 2 million Canadians have Indian origin. That's about 5% of the Canadian population. And those numbers are growing every day. So India is the top supplier of people to Canada in every category of visa. We currently process over 15,000 visas a week for Indians who are visiting Canada in one category or another. That might be a business visa, tourist visa, student visas. 340,000 young Indians getting their education in Canada just last year. And again, those numbers growing up, and we want to see that continue. The diaspora in Canada is successful in every walk of life, from arts and culture to business and, of course, politics. Canadian cabinet ministers, the first Indo-Canadian premier of a Canadian province was Ujjal Dosanjh just not so many years ago. So it goes deeper than that. I look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Right. Thanks so much, High Commissioner. Emily, over to you. Australia, a big destination like Canada, like the United States for Indian students and Indian diaspora in general.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me here and to be among such esteemed company and with all of you here. Working as I do at the Australian High Commission here in New Delhi, I have the really great privilege of working directly to support and grow Australia's relationship with India. I've got the opportunity to bolster, to capitalise on and to really collaborate with those people-to-people links that underpin the successes of the Australia-India Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. And as Australian Prime Minister Albanese said in May during Prime Minister Modi's visit to Sydney, India is a relationship that we, Australia, really need to invest in. And last week in the media, I was really pleased to see India's External Affairs Minister Jaishankar make similar comments to some of our journalists that were published back home. And he said that Australia's ties with India were undergoing an historic sea change, and that he was very optimistic about the bilateral relationship. So I think it's probably fair to say that Australia and India are on the same page and that our relationship is at a really high point. And we've recognised the benefits to be gained from cultural links and enterprise, and our people-to-people connections that we have, particularly through our diaspora, can't be underestimated in how important they are to foster this and to grow this. Australia's Indian communities are hugely important in contributing to our society back home. They're active across all aspects of Australian life, and I'm hearing a similar story to those conveyed by our panellists here, in that we have people in business, in politics, in the judiciary, government, civil society, academia, science, the arts. I'm going to mention sport because I could not mention sport, being an Australian in India, with our fondness and partnership in cricket, of course. Our Indian community back home is our second largest. It's our fastest growing overseas born group. I want to give you some numbers as well. In our latest census, it showed that 1 million Australians, or almost 1 million Australians, have Indian origin, and of that number, about 700,000 are actually Indian born. That's huge for Australia because our entire population is 26 million. So we're looking at, nearly 4% of our country having a really strong connection with India. And in May, when Prime Minister Modi visited, we saw the vibrancy of Australia's Indian community at the stadium event, the Diaspora event, where he was welcomed by Prime Minister Albanese. So through our efforts to work with and through our diaspora, Australia is clearly recognising that it's the human bridge between our two countries that binds us, but it's also a really great opportunity for things to blossom from. The diaspora is energetic, ambitious, dynamic and influential in Australia, and forms a really integral part of our multicultural society. So I'm really pleased to be here with you today to speak about it.
Master Keshap, if I can begin with you, give our audience a sense of the role that the Indian diaspora has played in bringing US-India close together through the ups and downs over the last 2 decades. And one critical assessment that we always get in the media, we're always excited, always proud when a member of Indian diaspora becomes a member of the Congress, or becomes the Vice President of America, or becomes the head of state for any country for that matter. But we're always told to be realistic that that person stands for that country's interest first. Having said that, how does the Indian diaspora bring the two countries together? Give us a sense.
Parikshit, thank you very much. May I, if you'll indulge me, may I tell another story?
Sure.
All right, I have this story from 2 absolutely reliable witnesses, and so I feel confident in retelling it. And it is a story that goes back to the era when candidate George W. Bush was running for President of the United States. And there was a gathering in Crawford at the ranch where all of these Republican graybeards were brought in. Dr. Rice assembled them, and they had a symposium about foreign policy, and they talked for hours and hours about many things: Middle East, Russia, China, this and that. And at the end of it all, as the story has been told to be by 2 reliable eyewitnesses, candidate Bush asked this group, he said, "What about India? None of you mentioned India." And they said, well, you know, India, I don't know, like, it's got potential, but we're not there yet. And he said, well, no, hear me out. In my state, in Texas, everywhere I go, in all these small towns all around Texas, every town has an Indian doctor who's one of the most important citizens in that town and provides a critical service in these very remote communities. And there's all these Indians that have moved to Texas and are, you know, pillars of the community. So I'd like to know more about India. Now, I tell the story because I think the Indian American community has succeeded famously, as you've mentioned, Vice President Harris, of course, being our leading member. But Indians have also worked very hard to be respectful, law-abiding citizens in the United States and to work to their full potential within a system that rewards potential. And so as this community has grown and become more influential, and as Americans have woken up to India beyond, you know, the elephants and the tigers and all that, but realize what India really is and what it represents, that community has been privileged to have a very important voice in helping steer the thinking of Americans about India. India, of course, itself, as a responsible stakeholder in world affairs, a net provider of global security and peace, a constructive member of the international community, has polished its own reputation in so many ways. And so for Indian Americans, it's a really easy pitch to talk to congressmen and senators, bureaucrats about the importance of the relationship. To your question, though, I'd like to mention that in the era of breakout possibility, and Ambassador Shringla remembers this very well, in the era of the nuclear deal, there were two diasporas that did incredible service to advance the U.S.-India relationship. One was the, of course, Indian American community. The other was the American Jewish community. And so those two diasporas have helped propel this relationship to where it is, and they serve, I think, as guardians for ensuring that the U.S.-India relationship can grow and thrive and become even stronger in the century to come. Thank you.
Right. Thanks so much, Ambassador Keshap. High Commissioner Mackay, if I can come to you now. You told us about at least 2 million people of Indian origin there in Canada contributing to the economy. If we were to ask you about how they have contributed to Canada over the last 2 decades, what would be some of the key contributions according to you? And we also believe there are 19 parliamentarians and 3 ministers of Indian origin in the cabinet.
Well, I think India's on the agenda in Canada always. And maybe I'll just give some examples of the Canada-India business relationship, which is about more than just the diaspora, but really the diaspora is at the heart of it. And I know, by the way, the greatest champion of this, we have in the back of the room Victor Thomas, who's the head of the Canada-India Business Council, a sponsor here. So let me give a shout out to him and to the CIBC. So we now have a bilateral commercial relationship of nearing $125 billion. That's led by almost $90 billion of Canadian institutional investment into India. That's the big Canadian pension plans, CPPIB and CDPQ, et cetera, and organizations like Brookfield Asset Management, Fairfax Financial, who have collectively put $90 billion into infrastructure, into renewable energy, all across the country, manufacturing, et cetera. And one of the key investors, of course, is Prem Watsa, founder of Fairfax. He's a perfect example of just the kind of diaspora citizen we want to see. Came to Canada in the 1960s, successful in the insurance business, then had enough capital that he created a capital investment company. He's now put $7 billion into India. Last year, at the Indiaspora forum just here, he said that he was likely to double his investment over the next 5 years. And I'm hearing just the same thing from the Canadian pension plans and Brookfield as well. So it's that kind of leadership that can take the Canada-India commercial relationship forward, and that's led by the diaspora.
Right. Thank you so much, High Commissioner Mackay, for those remarks. Emily, if I can get you in at this stage. Yes, we're discussing the contribution of the diaspora to the Australian economy, the cultural exchanges between the two countries. But today in the world, and especially after the pandemic, everyone is looking for a trusted supply chain partner. India is also rising, and the image of India is coming across as a country which can be a trusted partner in the world. India and Australia has signed a FTA very, very recently. Our trade will only go up. Give us a sense of the opportunities this is bringing to the Indian diaspora, and to what extent has the Indian diaspora contributed to our economic relations to where they are today?
Thank you so much, and absolutely I want to recognise the importance of the trade relationship between Australia and India. We were really pleased to enter into our ECTA, our Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, in December last year, and we're working very dedicatedly towards the further iteration of that, which we hope to conclude this year. More broadly, I think it can't be underestimated how important the diaspora has been to fostering those economic connections between Australia and India. Back home we did some research. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade produced a report called Australia's Indian Diaspora, a National Asset, which really highlights how Indian Australian groups are uniquely placed to contribute across sectors of significance in our relationship with India, and it's really helped us better understand exactly those contributions. And it found that the Indian diaspora is a really rich source of dynamism and enterprise. It's really well represented across the business community, including in key sectors like bilateral economic relationship like health, like tourism, ICT, resources, and sectors with really strong export potential. And as our ties with India continue to gain ground, the diaspora is really, those networks have really demonstrated their readiness to contribute further with their expertise and entrepreneurialism to the economic relationship. They have the connections, they have the language skills, and they have that know-how that's really relevant to understanding India's complex markets, as well as influencing Australia's perception within them. So, in short, we're really lucky to have nearly 4% of our population really boosting our trade relationship.
Right. Thanks, Emily, for putting the India-Australia partnership in the context of the Indian diaspora for us. Ambassador Gilon, if I were to ask you, 85,000, you corrected me earlier that there are 85,000 people of Indian origin in Israel. One thing is very clear from the panel is that when it comes to the Indian diaspora, these are people that we would always consider as our friends. We can rely on them for advice to put our word forward in a friendly, in a gentle manner to their host countries. But when it comes to the G20, and right now it is the final lap, when we need consensus, when we need countries on board, if we need to solve the biggest problems of our time, what role can a diaspora play, can the Indian diaspora play in convincing their host countries about India's agenda?
Well, as you said, it's about 1% of the population of Israel is of Indian origin. I think that the secret of our very intimate relations are the people-to-people part. I mean, that's the strong basis. I've been a diplomat in quite many countries. I've seen quite big pockets, strong pockets of support to Israel, but the wide support that you see here in India is very unique, I believe. And the Indians, Indian diaspora in Israel, immigrated to Israel relatively early when Israel was established. And the Indian culture was part and parcel of the Israeli culture, be it Bollywood films that on our only one channel of TV were broadcasted quite often, be it Indian food. Now Rina Pushkarna, the lady who brought Indian food to Israel in the 70s, was awarded by the president the highest award. So I think this is the very strong link that enables our two countries really to work together.
Thank you very much to all our panelists for joining us and everyone in the audience. It's been a fantastic discussion, but thank you so much for joining us here. It's been fantastic, and clearly the Indian diaspora has contributed a lot, and there's lots to do after the G20 concludes on the 10th of September. Thanks once again.